we were talking about the mission of God in you and how you becoming you is a magnificent expression of what God is up to in the world. Now, tonight, we're going to zoom up to the macro level. You'll actually be treated to some of that this afternoon as Brad talks with you about formation. And you're going to have and I'm going to talk to you about, this, how you fit into that mission and what I think we have a responsibility for at this critical juncture in Western Christianity. But I'm building the on-ramp to that still by helping you or thinking with you today about how you become more of you, because it's not accidental that you've shown up on the planet just now. And it's not an unintentional act of creation that God would decide to put you in Western culture, here in Labrador and Newfoundland, and the responsibilities that you have in your movement. And so, with all that He has invested in you, if we can call out that line of credit and count on that line of credit, then you're going to be in better shape to lead this larger mission. But last night I talked about some issues related to self-awareness, and what I want to do today, there they are. What I want to do this morning is talk about another category. We talked about self-awareness last night, but I want to talk about self-development this morning. And there are really only two buckets that I'm going to reference. And the first one is those that are in, sometimes I get these really weak markers. And, if you can't get high off of them, they're just worthless. Just to remind me of what I'm supposed to be talking about, under self-development, I'm just going to talk about, this is a really poor flip chart. I actually gave a description to have a solid back cardboard. Look at this, flimsy stuff. All right, so the first category I'm going to talk about is lifelong learning. And I'm not going to say all that much about it, because you know that. You wouldn't be here if you weren't committed to lifelong learning. But I can tell you there's a dirty little secret about lifelong learning, and that is that it requires lifelong unlearning in order to create room for the new learnings. And what I find is that there are people that are unwilling to let go of old stuff so that they can clean out enough storage room to learn new things. Now, this is not just Newfoundland. Well, let's take a theological example. What do you think Paul had to unlearn in order to become the premier Christian shaper of the movement in that, or the shaper of that early Christian movement? Think of all he had to unlearn. He has to unlearn, for instance, with the Jewish radical monotheism, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one." He has to unlearn some pretty significant conceptions about God to move to a Trinitarian view of how God expresses himself in his being. Holy cow, no wonder he had to go to the desert to put his head on straight. I mean, what every Pharisee knew was that when the Messianic era was announced, it would be preceded by a resurrection of the just that would signal the beginning of the Messianic reign. So when he runs into a resurrected being, on the way to Damascus, he has to think, holy cow, there's been a resurrection. The Messianic era has arrived. That means the Messiah has come. That means, oops, big oops. Boy, did we miss it. But God's not through with him yet. After Jesus talks to him and he can't see anymore, goes, and you guys wrote the book on this. You have the Holy Spirit, because you guys own that part of the Godhead. So the Nazarenes get Jesus. Anyway, and we Baptists, we just got John. I mean, we got shafted. Anyway, so so here's the Spirit working Paul over, because when he comes down to us, he says, I've been dealing with this guy for a few days. So Paul's got to deal with this divine encounter and fit it into, goodness gracious. It only took the church 3 centuries to figure out how to say it in the creed. 300 years to wrap language around this new reality that had come. Think of the unlearning. And then Paul had to unlearn all that stuff about, Jew and Gentile and male and female and slave and free, all that stuff. But let's think more personally. We have to unlearn some stuff, like in some of the things I was talking about last night. For instance, one of the topics I didn't get to, in terms of our self-understanding, our self-awareness, is our boundary, the boundaries we carry, or the boundaries we violate, or we don't protect. There's for instance, if you've read Cloud and Townsend's book on boundaries, have you read this book? If you're in your 20s, all the 20-somethings, raise your hand over here in this section. That's right. They clump together. This is the millennial troop over here. You've got to get this book. Crawl across broken glass to get this book. And read it. Get you a bag of Prozac and sift through it. And what you'll discover, of course, is Cloud and Townsend, in their wonderful way, identify 4 boundary issues that we run into that cause us difficulties. Now, 2 of them especially stick out for me in terms of coaching ministers. The one is the compliant, the overly compliant. I run into this a lot in ministers. In fact, boundaries, in case you don't, just for your, just to use an analogy, it's kind of our fences where we recognize our property ends and the rest of the world picks up. And some of us have trouble closing the gate. And that's the overly compliant. We can't say no, even to harmful things that hurt us. And I'm not just talking about, chemicals and things like that, but I'm talking about demands on our time that are unrealistic, that are unhealthy for us. People come up and ask us, we're having a tea for our knitting club or whatever next week, and we'd love for you to come and say a prayer over it or something. And you're going inside of your mind, wait, I've been out for 3 days. I can't, but I'm going to be out 4 more. I have a family. And you hear all this no. What does this have to do with anything? And then you open your mouth and yes falls out. I'd be happy to be there. I can't wait. I've always wondered what that was like. And as soon as you say, you go, you're mad at them. You're mostly mad at you. Why couldn't I just say no? I remember our very first days of marriage. Marilyn called me up one day. John and I are having a party Friday night. I was in my office, which was a closet in the duplex we lived in. Kathy overheard it. I said, we'll be happy to be there. Hey, hon, John and Marilyn are having a party at their house on Friday night. Will that be fun? Silence. I go in to make sure she's still breathing to the other room in the duplex. Hey, baby, did you hear me? He said, yeah, I heard you. I thought Friday night was our date night. And we'd already made plans. Yeah, but it's John and Marilyn. That was okay, whatever. Call back Marilyn. Marilyn, I made boo-boo. I had already promised Kathy we'd go into Dallas on Friday night. I'm just not going to be able to be there. She says, I wish, and I was sweating green paint, thinking John and Marilyn will never invite us to their home again. They're going, I was associate pastor at this congregation. They're not going to like me. There'll be a movement by Sunday morning, this antisocial guy that we've got on staff. I mean, all of these sick things that I'm thinking. So I just I made a commitment to Kathy, threw Kathy under the bus. And in an act of, husbandly courage. Wife is a shield. Marilyn's response, well, I wish John would take me to Dallas sometime. I just think that's the sweetest thing. What a relief to discover you really can have your own personal life. And other people actually expect you to. That had never occurred to me in my young 20s. I still thought I was supposed to be available to everybody for everything. Now, by the way, I wish I'd learned that lesson really, really strongly. I didn't. Because the other issue, and by the way, you do have, what I'm trying to say is you have permission to close the gate and say, this is our time. This is what it's required for me in order to have the emotional, physical, spiritual stamina to carry on in the larger stuff. It's okay to do that. You don't have to be ugly about it. You don't have to, like the one pastor that stood up and announced he was no longer going to be available to the congregation in the morning because his mornings were for God and all that. Well, all he did was signal to most of the folks who never expected to find him in the morning, didn't want him to deal with him in the morning. They could barely stomach him on Sundays. But all he basically did was announce that he was depriving them of pastoral. I mean, you could be smart about it. Don't hand people a club to beat you with. The other issue I find in boundaries is the controllers. Because and there are two kinds of controllers. And you have to really be, and it's not the aggressive controllers that are going to give you the biggest problem. I mean, you finally figure out who they are. They just come through the jungle like a bull elephant raging, and one of your jobs is just to drop them with an elephant gun. Just one good shot, because you've got to protect the flock from being trampled to death by these folks. So you'll learn to do that. It's the passive controllers that are the really spooky kind. Because you see, they're kind of interesting people. Now, I don't know, do you worm fish up here in Labrador and Newfoundland? Okay. So I learned to worm fish what do you fish for? Bass? Or you fish for worms? Let's start over. Let me draw a picture. Artificial worms to catch real fish. And we did it in all these ponds around, they called them tanks in East Texas, where I thought these people were armed to the teeth when I moved there, because they were all talking about the tanks they had on their property, and I thought, great Lord. So this is where the surplus went. And so, but what they meant was, these are ponds, and they're black water, and they're very still. And so I learned, you cast out, and the artificial lure, you just let it go to the bottom of the lake. You're fishing for bass, big mouth bass. And you learn, you can feel it hit the bottom, then you crank it up just a little bit. And you just sit there and you play with it a little bit, and you can learn to feel through the line and the rod and watch it. You can feel a bass will come by and hit it sometime. Just play with it. And then you can feel them nibble on it. You got to learn to be patient. And then you finally learn what it feels like when they take the bait and they swallow it, and that's when you set the hook. And man, the fight is on, and it is so much fun. And then you reel that sucker up. Now, passive controllers dangle bait in front of you. You're just swimming along, doing your thing, ministering to people, living life, enjoying God and all that kind of stuff, and you come across this thing. And boy, do they know how to they know the right bait, and they know when to attack the hook. And suddenly you're going someplace you didn't intend to be. And I'll tell you, their favorite bait is guilt. They're very good at this. They're very good at this. You know, our last pastor, and boy, you're suddenly playing with this thing. Or, you know, I know you don't have time for someone like me. You're right. I don't recommend that, but that's in the little cloud above your head. And man, I mean, as soon as you're in, and here you go. Now, by the way, some of those bass are so smart that when I got them to the surface, they just spit the hook out. They knew how to do this, old geezers. And so I can tell you, even when you get hooked, you can there's still hope for you until they get you in the boat. Isn't it funny what we put fish in live wells? That's what they call them, live wells. There's nothing on the way to living in a live well. Everything in there is on the way to dying. It kind of reminds me of when we fish for people and we catch them, then we throw them in the church. Anyway, we pipe in really good music and great programs. Just keep them stirred up every 6 days. Oxygen eventually runs out. And so then we have to develop more programs to stimulate them. The only thing that works is a catch and release. That's the only thing that keeps fish alive. You know, we're talking about discipleship up here. I would recommend a catch and release program for your discipleship. We never let people go. We keep them as big old honking babies in the nursery. We're rocking them on our laps, and they, you know, weigh 400 pounds, and they're 87 years old. There's never a graduation. I don't want to talk about that anymore. I'll tell you a story, though, about, so are we recording this? I don't know if I gave permission for that or my attorneys. I'm curious because I will change names if we are recording. Okay. These are not real people that I'm talking about. This story is completely made up. It never happened, but it was told to me, but it was told to me by a friend. So I get this call, right? You've gotten these calls. We'd like to come see you. Sure, make the appointment. They come by, sit down. What's up? Well, you just really disappointed us. What? Well, when, Charles's daddy died a couple weeks, yeah? Well, you didn't come by the house to see us. Now, a little background. This couple had been in my congregation for 3 years. I thought we were copacetic. We spent a lot of time together. His dad had Alzheimer's. Prayed for him every week. He was a deacon. Charles was. The dad lived in another state. Prayed for him all the time. Asked about him all the time. His dad died the weekend we were moving the church from one location to another. If you've ever done that, it could be a little consuming. And I got the call. They were headed out of town. And I got the news from the wife who said it wouldn't hurt. This should be a clue to you. It wouldn't hurt if you'd call Charles. Like, what do you mean it wouldn't hurt? I just found out. I mean, why would that hurt? And so I called him, talked about it. They come back a day early, Sunday night. I don't even know they're in town. It's the weekend we move. I didn't have time for my own funeral that weekend if I'd had one. Couldn't have attended it. And but I want you to hear what sick sounds like. Because I told you last night, my burnout experience. I want you to hear what sick sounds like. They talked about that. I'm flashing through all that. When could I possibly have gone by? You see, the one act of pastoral care that counted, I didn't do in their mind. And so I said, I'm sorry. I should have come. I want you to hear that because that is a sick, emotionally sick response. It was not feasible, not even possible, but I was so willing and so desperate for them to, accept me and love me and give me affirmation, all that kind of stuff. I pledged, being sorry for something that was, all right. Now I want you to fast forward a year. I've dealt with burnout. I've worked through some stuff. Call comes late, same lady, late Saturday afternoon, mid-Saturday afternoon. I hear you're leaving town. Yes. Calls me home. Yep, I'm flying to Colorado. I'm in a conference up there. She said, well, you know that our daughter's being set aside for summer missions. Like I didn't know that. I'd helped raise the money, all that kind of stuff. I said, well, yeah, we've got it taken care of at the end of the service. Mike, the associate's going to come. We're going to pray. Well, we're just really disappointed that you're not going to be there for this momentous occasion. And she says, we just have a problem. Now, my next phrase out of my mouth was, no, Mary, we don't have a problem. You have a problem. I want you to know, in my adult life, I had never heard myself just close the gate and say, this trash does not belong in my yard. That's your trash, not mine. And immediately inside, I went, yes, that I'd been able to just close the gate, say, I don't own that. And then the very next thought I had was, oh, man, I felt like crud. How could you say that? How could you be so insensitive? You're her pastor. You can't talk to people like that, all this kind of stuff. You can't signal your true feelings to folks, about their situation and what they need to take responsibility. All this stuff comes clouding. Now, I want you to know why I tell you this. Because if you've been walking like this for 30-something years, and you stand up and you look around, this feels a whole lot more normal. This doesn't feel so good. When you're trying to repair boundaries, you cannot trust your emotions because they have been bent to support your boundary violations. So I did the only thing that you can do and that I could do right then. I called 3 men who at this point in my life constructed a team of folks to help me out of this situation. And I told each one of them exactly what had happened. And to a person, they said, it's about time. You see, because you need external validation to move forward on boundary violations. Now that is, what I'm saying is I had to unlearn some pretty deep behavior. And that's stuff I was talking about last night. We've got to unlearn some of that stuff that keeps us in bondage, that keeps us under wraps, that keeps us underperforming, that keeps us off mission while we try to plug the holes in our own life and can't minister then out of a position of health. Because ministering out of a position of thinking that I owe this to people over time is not a very healthy place to be. It's like, how long does that sustain a marriage? I'm just doing this because I feel trapped in it and I need to do it. I mean, you all know that it doesn't work that way. So lifelong unlearning is a critical part of self-development to make room for the learning. Now, tonight I'm going to talk about a huge unlearning for the church in the West right now, but more on that then. The other thing is living in this category is learning to work from your strengths. Now, we've had so much talk about this the last 15 years now that it's almost as if everybody understands this. But I want to point out a few things about living on your strengths and out of your strengths. First of all, I find that many people are naive about what they're really good at. Ted Williams, I know that there's a softball field down the hill coming here. I don't know how much baseball, is a part of your world. I know hockey is more of a thing that I don't know much about. And I take that as that an amen or an utterance of the Spirit? I didn't quite get it. Can you translate what he just said? Well, Ted Williams was an American baseball player who set a record. Do you know anybody? What is his record? You were confident a moment ago till I asked for it. What was his record? Batting average. Last guy to bat over 400, 406, 19 or something like that, 1942, something like that. I may have mixed a few, made up some of those numbers. But he's over 400. And it's over 70 years ago. This is a record that stood for 70 years. That's unbelievable in the sports world, that a record stands. Now, Ted Williams, by the way, he's in cryogenic freeze near Phoenix. And they lost his head a few years ago. I don't know, somebody put it down in the lettuce drawer or something. I don't know. I mean, why do they separate the head in a cryogenic freeze thing? Like, I mean, is that bizarre or what? But anyway, they found it. But when Ted was warm and together, he was an incredible hitter, and he was down in training, spring training, and the batting coach says, "Hey, Williams, we got this new kid that's just come up from the minors. Could you help him out a little bit?" So he wanders up to the batting cage, and he's watching this 20-year-old, 19-year-old face these 95-mile-an-hour fastballs. This kid's never seen anything like this on a consistent basis, and and Williams just leans in and says, "Hey, kid, just watch the stitches." Kid goes, "Huh?" He said, "Just watch the stitches." Kid goes, "What stitches?" Williams says, "On the baseball." And then he describes how the rotation of the stitches on on the baseball coming at you 95 miles an hour impacts how the ball moves between the pitching mound and home plate. Now, it's 60 feet, 6 inches between the pitching mound and home plate. I've never seen a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, but here's what I've heard. The first 10 feet, the ball's a blur. The next 50 feet, 6 inches, it's invisible. And here's Ted Williams saying, "Watch the stitches." Why was that such lousy advice? I can tell you it's because Ted Williams had no idea that he had 20/10 vision. He had no idea he could see things other people couldn't see because it was just natural for him. They said, "What else can you see?" He said, "Well, on a good day, I can read the commissioner's signature on the ball at 95 miles an hour." Can you imagine such a thing? Now, I'm telling you, in the area, but see, he was naive about his strength, about that talent. And I can stand in the shower all day long. I'm going for 20/10 today. It just ain't going to happen. You either got it or you don't when it comes to that kind of stuff. That's the way it is with your talent. You didn't earn it. It was given to us. It is a divine appointment and a divine, outlay. I mean, the scriptures make this very plain. But what I find is that we have grown, when you grow those talents, when they are part of you all the time, sometimes you don't appreciate how really talented that is and how special. And you tend to think other people have the same talents. That's stuff that comes to you like falling off a log. See, we kind of grew up in a culture, if we didn't earn it, it doesn't count. In the area of your talent, you didn't earn it. It's a gift. And so learning not to expect other people, by the way, to use your talent. If you're going to build a strengths culture, you actually have to let go of your expectations that other people perform well in the areas where you naturally are talented and let them do well in theirs. You see, it takes a lot of courage. We all like to say, "I just want to do well." But it takes courage to create a strengths culture, because what you say is, in the area of my talent, I can deliver. Just let me at it. And see, the deal is, though, Because I don't know how pastors move around in your tribe. But in the world that I grew up in, Baptist congregations, we have these corporate raiding parties, pastor search committees, and they go off on safari when looking for some animal when the church gets pastorless, which most of 20% of ours are all the time, at some given point in time. And so, and they do this, I don't know when this got in the water, but they do this congregational profile, pastor profile. And they build a profile by asking people in the congregation to give them insight. This is an idea straight from the pit. Because what happens, this is like constructing a catfish sucking trash off the bottom of the pond approach to building something. Because everybody puts in their grievance. And we mostly are trying to fix the last guy. And so we build this profile that Jesus and all 12 disciples wouldn't be able to do. And we give it to the pastor search committee and say, go find this beast. And they say, well, we don't know what it looks like, but we'll know it when we find it because we're very spiritual about this. And so off we go, and they come to our pastors, and they say, here's what our congregation's looking for. And our pastors look at it and say, Jesus and all 12 disciples didn't do this, but I'm dancing pretty hard where I am, so, maybe I'll take another, because it's a way to take a little bit of emotional break. The kudzu can drop off, it was in mesh. So it takes a couple of years. And so we bring these people in with this expectation they're going to be good at all this stuff across the board. That they have to be good at all of these things. This is an absurd. I know nothing about hockey, as I've already told you, and I should bone up on that, I guess, before I come up here if I'm going to speak to it. But, I assume you have various positions that play with certain assignments. How many people are on a hockey team out on the field at any one time on the ice? 5? 6? 5 or 6. Depending on who's in the penalty box, who clubbed who last, and all. I understand. So you got 5 or 6 people out there, and 6. All right, I'm tired of arguing about this. Wish y'all'd learn your hockey. All right, so 6 people out there. Now, what if everybody was all trying? What if we were judging across the board? Like in NFL football, that would be like expecting the quarterback to punt, pass, block. Do all of this stuff. You don't build championship teams off of expecting everybody to do everything equally well. This is why we don't have championship leadership teams in our congregations. You've got to do what's going to take you to the Super Bowl, or what's that in hockey? That's what I was trying to say. I just wanted to make sure y'all are paying attention. You don't get to the Stanley Cup by having mediocre players all kind of mushing through their stuff. You get to the Stanley Cup by having people who are profoundly good set free to do what they do best. When we get that, it's going to make a huge difference. But by the way, it takes a lot of courage, more courage than the average bear, because that means we actually have to perform at what we say we're good at. And then we have to we have to release other people from these expectations. Like it's like we ask volunteers all the time. We'll recruit people to jobs, and then for what they bring to the table, then we start beating them up for what they don't bring to the table. So you've got to create a culture like this. So in your own development, you've got to practice, get better at what you are good at. That is your best shot at making your best contribution to the world, is for you to get better at what you are already good at. Now, you can spend all of your life trying to fix potholes, but it's better to build a road. You can try to and you should not ignore your weaknesses. Don't hear what I'm not saying. You've got to do, you have to have some administrative capability. You have to have some, but put your best on. Try 20-something. Try from now to the rest of your life. Your job is to lower your rent so you can spend the time doing the stuff that you're really good at, because that's what we're counting on you to bring to the table for this movement. Now, I can tell you that you can take a, Strengths Finder. I mean, there are all kinds of languages that will help you do this. There are ways that you can. But even if you don't take an instrument, there are clues to your strengths. Like, for instance, what is the stuff that, makes you feel most alive? I can remember back in my first year of marriage, Kathy and I got home from school, attending a graduate class, and Kathy said, I want to go to the movies tonight. What do we want to see? She said, there's this new movie out, Chariots of Fire. I want to see it. I had no idea what Chariots of Fire was about. I thought it was a science fiction flick. I mean, Chariots of Fire, Ezekiel, I didn't know. It didn't matter. Kathy wanted to go. So we walked from our duplex, the 2 blocks up to the movie theater there on the square in Kaufman, Texas, just south of Dallas. And I, bought the stuff and sat down and assumed my usual position, sitting in the seat with my legs thrown over the seat in front of me. Not out of disrespect, by the way, to the furniture or whatever, or the theater, but because it was a very old theater. When the lights went down in that theater, all kinds of stuff came out roaming around, down there. You didn't want any body part hanging down, below the seat. In fact, you bought refreshments there just to feed the stuff that was roaming around, just to keep them off of you. And if you ran out of, it was terrible. By the way, is it getting warm to anybody else in here? I just thought I'd mention that. My comfort level is supremely important to me. So, because what happens is when it gets really warm with it, they can't hear anymore. And there are people dropping like flies in here. I mean, and for those of you who have to sit through the next presentation, I pity that speaker if you've been sitting here sweating that. All right, now, in the movie, there comes this place, this time. You know the movie. Eric Little putting off going to China to do something frivolous like running the Olympics. Missionarying is the family business. His sister's a little distressed that he seems to be getting the big head. And so he takes her out on a little walk outside of the church there in Edinburgh to explanify things to her. And he says, Jenny, God made me for a purpose. China. Oh, Eric. Because she thinks he's going to get on the next boat going. But then what's the next line? But he also made me fast. When I run, finish it for me. Y'all don't get to go to movies, do you, as Pentecostals? I forgot. This didn't have a lot of bad language in it. Eric Little's a runner, Scottish runner. Let's go back to the beginning. And Olympics is the big game. And they run races and win things like gold. See, I knew it was hot in here. People can't even think anymore. Brains are fried. So Eric Little is explaining, Jenny, I know I need to go to China. I'm going, but I'm going to run these Olympics because God made me fast. And the immortal line to me is, when I run, I feel his pleasure. What a great line. God made me fast, so when I run, I feel his pleasure. Let me tell you, that was one of those moments in life. I completely forgot where I was. Sat straight up, my feet hit the floor. The deck reshuffled all the way back. It had never occurred to me that I could bring a smile to the face of God like that. See, I'd grown up in church. I knew how to keep God up nights worrying. I certainly knew how to make him frown. I didn't even know that was in the Bible. Psalm 149, verse 4, part A. For the Lord takes pleasure in his people. Oh, my goodness. Now, I'll tell you how susceptible I am to new insights. When the movie was over that night, I went jogging. I did not feel God's pleasure. In fact, I tried for 3 years. I tried to run into God's pleasure for 3 years. Right? You know, other people would talk about having a runner's high. I had a consistent runner's low. Other folks would talk about praying while my only prayer is, oh God, just let me get back to the house. I mean, it was visions of ice cream that kept me going. And I can tell you, I decided when I eat, I feel His pleasure. And, I mean, that's why buffets, I just cause God to laugh out loud. I mean, but I'm telling you, there are those things you do in your life that when you do them, you go, hot dog. This is what I'm here for. That's why God put me on the planet. You just feel so alive when you do it. And you feel the wind in your sails. And you feel like, yes. Now, pay attention to that. I would ask, what kind of God would let you have that glimpse and then say, but not too much of that now? Are you kidding? That's stuff that when you do it, you feel most like. Try to reduce the rent to get to do more of that. Pay attention to areas where you learn quickly. That's another clue to your strengths. Because in the area of your strengths, you're always able to assimilate and you're always able to move. And I suspect our strengths don't die with us. I suspect the talent you have carries over into the next life. Because eyes not seen, ears not heard, neither has entered into what God has prepared for us, and we've got some work to do. See, because, by the way, God didn't make people to get work done. God made work to get people done. And what happens is, as you work is that way of being able to figure out what you do best and bring to the table. Where you learn really quick is a clue. Where you have an interest in other people just yawn off, that's a clue. All these are clues to your talent. And so, I don't want to take any more questions about that. Because I want to say one more word to build the connection to what I'm going to talk about tonight. And that is, in terms of your becoming you, we've talked about self-awareness, self-development, but I think it's important that you have a strong and cultivate a strong sense of mission. That would be the other category out of a bunch of categories I could talk about. And all I want to say here, because I only have 10 minutes to say it, is I run into people that, even spiritual leaders, that don't know why they're here in particular. We only know why we're here in general. Well, and generally that gets assigned to a role. I'm a pastor. I'm a church leader. I do this. Oh, come on, we can do better than this. God didn't put you here to sing to do cover songs of other people's vision. There is something that God wants you to contribute. And I will tell you, 20 younglings, that once you latch on to that, I can tell you that there are different chapters. But my hunch is, looking back, the theme carries through all of those chapters. God's not schizo, and He's not disorganized, and He's not trying to put it together. He's a great begin with the end in mind guy, and He's sent you here this way, and He's pulling you forward to the great mission that He's given you. And just a couple of things about pay it to know what that is. In fact, if I were to say to you right now, just turn to the person next to you and say why you're on the planet. Some of us would struggle with that. I'm here to pay taxes and vote conservative, and or pay less taxes and vote or whatever, or I'm here to pastor this on. But really, what is the theme? What would other people say is the theme? I had a guy leave my congregation one time. A lot of people leave the church where I pastored. And when on the way out, he said, "You only have 7 sermons." Kind of hurt my feelings because he'd been there like 5 years. But looking back, I think he was pretty generous. I don't think I have 7 things to say. I really don't. There's a theme. I mean, and by the way, once you know your theme, you'll take any Bible stuff to get to it. Because it just bleeds through. That's your song. That's your song. And that's the imprint. That's what the lordship of Jesus looks like in your life, for that song to be sung. They'll eventually, now that we can digitize everything, they'll eventually digitize your DNA and turn it to music. And we'll figure out the song that we do, the tune that we lend to this great choir that God is building. And if you don't sing that song, there's nobody else with that tune. See? It's fascinating. But the enemy whose kingdom you are invading wants to knock you off mission. And so what he does is he anesthetizes you, because one of the ways part of your mission is the stuff that brings you pain. What breaks your heart? I had Suna Anderson speak to a group of pastors in Dallas. Suna's executive pastor at the largest evangelical congregation in Denmark. Now you're thinking, well, it doesn't have to be that big to be large. But I mean, they have 1,000 people or more in this college town. It's a growing congregation, very unusual in Denmark, where the state church is Lutheran, and typically you might have 3 people knocking around on a Sunday. The organist, full-time paid position, and the pastor, who does not have to even believe in God because he's a state employee. And this is the state of Europe. Or am I talking about Quebec? We're just trailing. And so for the congregation to be vibrant like this, as soon as the executive pastor, Suna moved his family from the burbs into a gated community, an apartment community in a lower socio-economic area. More impoverished, not poverty like we have poverty in the U.S. because the tax rate's 80% or whatever, but a lower, it was a move down. And he rented the apartment right next to the elevators on the first floor so he could meet everybody, because his intention by moving there was to be a missionary to that apartment complex. See, not all missionaries go off to Uzbekistan. Some actually stay in town. Anyway, so for these vast unreached people groups, like apartment complexes and gated community, all this stuff. So Suna moves there. First night, about 10 o'clock, the music cranks up. Boom, boom, with subwoofer. You feel it more than hear it. And so he's laying there, and the walls are boom, 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 boom. And kind of like the band here. You can kind of feel them more than hear them. Feels so good, though. And did she say something snide about my comments last night when she was... I suspected Carla got even. She just has that about her. Oh, she's back there. It's good to see you again this morning. We've already... It's fun. So, at least for one of us. And so he's thinking, and he cries, what have I done to my family to move us into here? And so the next day he goes next door, takes his wife and his son. Hi, we're the Andersons. We moved in. We'd love to have you for dinner. Can you come? I says, yeah, sounds good. Be there tonight. Yeah. He said, oh, by the way, last night, about 10 o'clock, music started up. I'm not sure where it's coming from. He knew exactly where it's coming. Not sure exactly. Is that routine here? Because, my son has to go to school and he's got to sleep. And so the guy goes, oh, man, I'm sorry. That's my bad. I apologize. That won't happen again. Guy comes to dinner, starts telling his story. Soon as says he reveals the fact that by age 3, by age 5, he's out on the street, physically, sexually abused by both parents, abandoned, street kid, raises himself or is raised by street gangs. He's not just a user, of course, he's a dealer by now. And soon as says, as I heard his story, he said, my heart broke for him. He said, when he told that group of pastors, he said, when my heart broke for him, he moved from being a problem to being a person. Sometimes, if I were really interested in what you thought, I'd give you time to say, what breaks your heart? And I would have you turn to your neighbor. Say, this is what breaks my heart. That is a clue. It's a clue to part of your missional expression. Because you will go missional at the point your heart breaks. Now, I did this in a group, and I had a lady come up to me after folks had been sharing. She's in her late 70s, I figure. And she says, you know what breaks my heart? And I lean over thinking I'm fixing to hear some profound sense of. She said, what breaks my heart is that nothing breaks my heart. She said, I realize as you talk, I'm not touched by anybody. I live in a bubble. Good kudos to her for having the courage to admit that her heart had just grown cold. Well, we got to get back to that tender place. You can't be missional without being tender towards something. So what breaks your heart? It's a clue. But the enemy, you see, will try to dent that. He'll try to debilitate you by putting you in a world where you're not able to function on your strengths. But you're trying to dance to other people's stuff and live up to their expectations. I mean, some of us, we spend so much time. I know, I feel the same way. Everybody here would like to amen that. Some of us shouldn't make hospital visits. People feel worse after we go see them. It takes a little emotional intelligence to have a good hospital visit. You go in, how you feeling? I had that once. It about killed me. I know you're going to make hospital, but my point is, so if you're spending all your time doing stuff you're not good at, you get worn out. You know what? Most of the burnout that I run into in ministry is not from great moral failure. It's from dealing with prolonged trivia. It's like being nibbled to death by toothless piranha. It's just this unending, it's not the first hit, but about 10,000 of those, you just sink under, I just can't take it anymore. And you can go on a vacation, you can go on a spiritual quest, you can fast, although I've discovered I can get my fasting done quicker than most people. I'm a quick learner, generally between meals, and I've got my stuff done. You can do all that stuff, but the minute you come back, if it feels like you never left, pay attention. You're in a debilitating situation, and you've got to take responsibility for this. Don't blame those other people. God's not going to ask you when you get to heaven, why'd you let those people do that to you? Really? Well, I'd like to whine a bit as to why I'm not the person you created me. And he's not going to ask you, why weren't you like Moses, and why weren't you like Paul, and why weren't you like Daniel, and why weren't you like... He's going to say, why weren't you Reggie? And why are you blaming other people for not being? So, debilitation, disappointment, discouragement, all these things the enemy tries to throw at you. And finally, and I know, guys, we got to go. He uses distraction as his major tool to knock you off mission. When I was in junior high school, we called it then, 1,000 years ago, we used to have these traveling science shows because we were in a race to the moon to beat the Ruskies. And so science and math are big. So all these travel were about science. About these people would come by in lab coats, and you could have school assemblies without doing, metal checks on kids, all that stuff. So we're sitting in this gym, with the big fans and everything, and we're seeing this movie. And some of you have no idea. You 20-something have no idea what it's like to watch with those old film projectors. You remember the reels the size of hubcaps? And the film had to be threaded through the machine. It was like 1.5 miles of threading to do, and it had to have just the right little dip in the I had to go around the sound drum just right. It was magic if it ever worked. I'm telling you. It was magic. Flipping a switch, hitting a button, a DVD. So we were watching this, and it comes up, and it's a frog. And you suddenly realize we're watching slow motion because the frog blink. Blink. And then this shadow comes into the deal, and this frog's eye cuts up to this shadow. And this bug, like a 747, goes streaking across in slow-mo. And this frog is tracking it. And just before the bug goes off over there, this moth, frog opens up his mouth, tongue goes out, wraps around the moth, sucks him back in. Blink. Cut the lights back on, stop the film. The visiting science guy goes, well, as you can see, frogs are attracted to motion. He said, they'll even eat a BB rolling by. And I thought, now that is a testable scientific hypothesis. I'm in 8th grade, more time on my hands. And so that night, my patio, and I used to shoot marbles when I was a kid. Took the little copper deals out from my little BB gun. Frog at the end, right on the basketball goal at the end. That big old frogs out there. I shot a BB, sucked it up. I said, holy cow. And then I shot one of those. I sucked that up, and I'm sorry. And that frog just sat there and just sucked up BBs till he couldn't move. And I didn't know how to help him. Don't know what happened to that frog. I suspect some cat or something had fun. There's a point to this. If I'm the enemy of your soul and I have figured out that you will eat BBs, I will shoot you BBs all day long. Not bad stuff. No one's sitting here saying, gosh, am I going to stay in ministry or open that video porn shop I've been thinking about? That's not how he comes at you. It's good stuff. You suck it up. One more invitation to be with, suck it up. One more thing to do, church business, suck it up. Conference, whatever. Beware of when Jesus, and whoever's going to close this out needs to ooze toward the platform. But over there in Mark, in the first chapter, you've got Jesus. He's done a big old honking miracle day. And they all expect the next day to be miracle day 2. Satellite trucks are all there. Band's out warming up the crowd. and it's time for Jesus to show up. 6 flags over Jesus. And the band quits playing, and there's no Jesus. Why? Because he's out praying. Peter, of course, says, I'll go find him. So they traipse off, and he comes to Jesus, finds him praying. He says, everyone's looking for you. You can check this out later. It's really in the Bible. First chapter of Mark, 30-something verses in there. And if you don't know the background, you see, you think that Peter's just informing Jesus. Hey, come on now. It's time. We're ready. This is our big day. Are you kidding? He is upbraiding Jesus. Everyone's looking for you. Don't you get it? This is the point. We've got national, international coverage. We've got people, they're circling, the drones are circling. We're ready to roll here. You know what Jesus' reply was? Tell him I'll be there in just a minute. I'm going to finish my devotional. His reply was, let's go somewhere else. So I can preach to the nearby villages, because that is why I have come. Now, going back to heal more dozens of people would not have been a bad thing to do, especially, by the way, if you were the guy they closed the gate on the night before, and you sat there all night waiting. Think our decisions are tough? Try being Jesus just for a minute. With the capacity to heal everybody and have to make decisions like. But see, he knew what he could say no to, so he could say yes to his mission. Tonight I hope to fill in a little more about what the yes is that I think God is counting on you for his mission in the world.